Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, M&T Bank, Genova Burns. Additional support is provided by AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Collins Building Services, Connect One Bank, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Meridian Capital Group, New Banks, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, The Moynihan Group, and These Friends.
Fashion, apparel. People say there are other cities in the world that are known for that, but there's only one fashion capital of the world. It's New York City. It's a city where fashion apparel is designed, sold, distributed, and it's here. This is the fashion capital. So today at the brand new opening of the Capital One Commercial Bank's headquarters in the pavilion, I've assembled a group of individuals to provide insight that the fashion and the apparel industry doesn't survive. It strives and grows in the 21st century. My guests, they include Richard Sutton, who's the CEO of LT Apparel Group, Michael Sacco, who's a partner at the accounting firm of Friedman LLP, Thomas Glucksman, who is the CEO at Balance, and last but not least, the market manager at Capital One Bank, our host, Joe Nastri. Joe, you've been involved with the textile and apparel and the fashion industry. How do you see it in 2015, 2016? Is it growing? Is it getting better? How difficult is it?
Sure. Well, Michael, I mean, people have to understand that while in general the industry is consolidating, it's still very fragmented from the brand standpoint. And when you think of apparel in New York City, in New York City itself,
remember, it's apparel and gloves also. It's
well, we bring
accessories are part of apparel.
I want to make
we
sure
consider
that everybody
yes.
remembers that.
We bring accessories into the fold also, but companies are transacting between 50 and 75 billion dollars in wholesale sales, and the difference there is really right in New York and versus call it the tri-state area. And that's a big industry. And if you're gonna be a bank in this town, you better be servicing that industry, and that's where we're involved.
I remember as Friedman, Alpert and Green going back, it's probably 80 years, 85 years, and they've always been involved with the fashion apparel industry. How do you see has the clientele type of changed? Has the requirements to help your clients changed?
I think there's definitely been regulation changes. I think every client is different in apparel. That's one thing that we see. You know, different size, different type of apparel, whether it be outerwear or women's or dress, or it's different industries within apparel. And you have to really understand the client, and you have to understand their sales, who they're selling to, where they're manufacturing, and basically all the issues they're dealing with, company by company. And when you understand the company, you can help them better.
Now, Richard, before the show, and you just brought up the government regulations. At one time, and I'll add myself because at one time I was involved with retail and apparel, there weren't that requirements of, if the fabric went on fire. I mean, there's much more difficulties, especially since you're bringing in products from all different parts of the world.
Well, being in the kids' apparel business, there's even more requirements. And, it's really just about understanding them and be able to communicate them right through our supply chain. Vendors today, manufacturers, mills, they're a lot more sophisticated than they were years ago. So they get as long as we can communicate a good understanding to them, they generally are able to meet those requirements. And then what we do is we document them and then hang on to that so that we can show our compliance, all the way through.
With the decrease in the number of major retailers, and I was saying prior to the show, Hudson Bay companies, Lord & Taylor, and Saks are owned by one entity. Macy's owns Bloomingdale's and a number of entities. So 58 years ago, or when the family was started, your company goes back to, it's like the Daughters of the American Revolution to the 1770s. I mean, there were more stores, there were more retailers. You're dealing with a smaller universe, perhaps, right?
Absolutely. Being able to reach the consumer is what the evolution that we see going on. But a good company is able to identify where the market's going to be 2-3 years ahead and then align themselves. And really, from the digital to the brick and mortar, being able to combine that effort I think it's critical. You can have the most amazing product, but if you're not able to get it in front of a consumer, you will not get the success you need.
So that's an interesting question. With a brick and mortar, and I said to all of you, I did a show recently on the effects of e-commerce on bricks and mortar. Mm-hmm. And what happened was we discussed that the fact that you don't have to go to Costco to pick up items. You can use Instacart, or you can use other services. But there was an article in the New York Times yesterday saying that if you use Instacart or something else, the cost can be much greater, okay? That you don't have to physically go there. How much of your business today is internet-oriented?
It's growing. It's still not the major portion, but I think it's growing dramatically. All our partners and all the retail partners are all looking at that as a growth area and something that's going to continue to evolve and grow quicker than anything else.
So, in that vein, especially since you're selling gloves, perhaps the Zappo, do you have to go out to Las Vegas to hit that type of market in the same way that at one time you had to go out? You still probably have to go out to Walmart country to deal with them.
We do travel very often to many of our customers, but selling online is only one small part of communicating online. And that's really where the bigger win is. Even though internet may not represent an enormous amount of our sales today, consumers were able to go into a store, literally stand in front of product, and then go on their mobile device and research, communicate, make a purchase, comp shop. So I think it's critical, certainly for LT Apparel Group, to be able to understand that and be able to give the consumer what they need so that whether or not they choose to buy online or in one of our partner stores, it's there for them.
Okay, my question is, when you're looking at lending to a company, mm-hmm. not even the gentleman over here, some of these companies, manufacturers, really sell their products on their internet. I was at your website. You don't really, because that's not your product to speak
we
of.
do sell our product online. We do have an internet presence.
Okay, but it's not your major, okay?
It is not the majority of our sales.
How do you look at that when you're lending to a company that has internet presence?
Sure.
As opposed to, regular inventory, receivables and so on.
The majority of the clients that we deal with are the designer wholesalers that are manufacturing either in their own shops abroad or with third-party folks. We look at, as far as the sales that they're doing on the internet, which again, for our clients are still about, it's relatively small. It's growing. I think internet sales on the retail side are growing about 14% a year. So it's major, but it's still overall represents a relatively small total. So when we're lending against receivables, for example, those internet sales are not going to come into play because they're usually getting paid very quickly with a credit card side of things.
We've been doing internet for 12 years now, really a pioneer selling school uniforms online, and we do a significant amount of drop ship
that was
for
a
our
different product.
retail partners as well.
Now, I brought up the consolidation. Now I'm going to get to the question of, there are retailers that are in tenuous conditions that we were talking about. It's not any question that Kmart, Sears, was initially a play for real estate. The partners were Vornado and other people. So, and then recently there have been a couple of other retailers that have bitten the dust, as they would say. Mm-hmm. How do you, especially since you want to sell and your products are required, how do you deal with the possibility of bankruptcy of these clients? You were saying about insurance and so on.
I mean, we really try and balance our risk portfolio. I think having no risk, you kind of lose the opportunity to grow your sales. So we do have an appetite for some risk, but it's really in a conservative nature. So we'll look at how much business we're going to do with a certain retailer and what's the schedule of how much we'll be shipping in on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, so that we can kind of monitor that credit up and down, so we know what our exposure is going to be, and then we just try and balance that exposure with partners like factors and like insurance opportunities, but some of them come at a very high cost.
Right.
I would agree. We work with certain retailers where we do have rapport as to feeding in deliveries and payments and trying to schedule to maintain some semblance of control. There has to be the balance between risk and target of growth and how far we want to go with certain people.
I emphasized at the onset of the show that the fashion and apparel industry survives and grows in New York. What I didn't say was there's not that much production today in New York. You produce upstate.
No, we did once, going back to the probably 1950s, but today we're 100% offshore. We opened our own we own our own factories, as well as having an office in China and Shanghai, which buys, but we own our own factories in southern China and the Philippines. We manufactured upstate in Gloversville, or Amsterdam, Gloversville, New York, through the 50s, then wound up opening up in the Philippines in the 50s. And as I said, solely owned factory, not a joint venture, in China in 1984. So that's quite a while.
Always been really an import-based company. We've had manufacturing here in the U.S. On and off, but not a major part. The kids' apparel industry is very price sensitive, and I think in order to be a major player as we are, you really need to be strong in the parts of the world where you can afford the right pricing strategy. And we have over 13 manufacturing facilities that we're have an interest in.
How do you decide when to increase your line or the product mix? How do you make that decision to increase? I mean, you've grown over the 58 years, you've grown many, many years. How do you decide that you're going to expand into the gloves for bicycles? Or how do you decide maybe children's and then maybe go to the Missy's or the other area?
Well, within the kids area, we have a very diverse brand strategy. We're really a market-driven company where we're looking at what is that brand going to allow me to do. And we've aligned ourselves with brands like Adidas and Carhartt and HealthTech and of course French Toast. So each one will play into a different segment of the market, so that will allow us to reach certain retailers and thus those consumers. And then when we look at it in totality, we want to make sure that there's the right balance there, that we're reaching the consumers that we want to be reaching, and that's what marquee brands afford you.
What about brands? How important do you feel it is? I mean, as you brought up some names that everybody knows, how important is it for a client of yours to have a brand or a private label as opposed to that?
Yeah, it's very competitive out there, right? So when consumers, they're always looking for discounts. They're looking, the retailers are giving them the discounts and passing the cost up to the wholesaler. wholesaler needs to have a good brand. They need to have a good product. If they have that good product, the margins will be there. And the companies with effective management that have managed that have seen that, like LT Apparel, for example.
Okay, but the same way that brand, it's like a flag for a hotel. You're paying for it. You have to give a commission unless you own those brands yourself. Adidas, you pay them a percentage for the use of the brand, correct?
We do.
Okay. A hotel, certain people can be a boutique, but not everybody is, the Morgans or, the Royalton or something.
It also goes back to what you're getting for that investment. So while we're paying Adidas, we're getting access to world-class information, light years ahead of coming out to the public. And then we're using that in our product innovation so that we're able to make product that's still an amazing value when it reaches the consumer.
For us, I think it's a combination of, we work with brands and license UGG for cold weather accessories, Nautica, Cuddle Duds, but then as well have our proprietary in-house brands, UR, which is developed as a higher tech brand, and do private label as well. So try and do the gamut.
Right, you have Uggs? You have Uggs right now?
Yes. So all the UGG earmuffs, gloves, hats are our product out there in the store.
As a banker, how important do you believe it is for the brand? I'd say probably very important.
Well, I think, like these gentlemen have said, you have to distinguish yourself with a real retailer, right? And, retailers, they want brands. They want brands, whether you own them or you license them, it really doesn't matter to them. It's you're delivering a product with that, with a known label. So it differentiates yourself. I don't want to say it gives you absolute control. It doesn't. I mean, but it does put you at a different level. And I think having your own brand, which these gentlemen have in their companies, having licensed brands, which they have, and doing some private label, the mixture of it, and the right. That's what makes these guys great, is knowing, the right mix and with the right partners, and that's why they've been around for so long.
But with it said, and whether it's a brand or whatever, I think, again, a lot of it comes back to product, and product has to evolve. It either evolves or you become extinct. We're moving more and more into wearable tech, touch gloves. We used to have gloves that only kept you warm. Now
you have to have gloves that have the ability to text.
You can text, you can work your phone. Sure. We've got wired headwear that you can listen to music or speak on your phone without, through wired headwear that interfaces with your ears. So all of this is product related, and I think has to evolve with the lifestyle of the people we're dealing with today, or our consumer, more active, little bit more casual lifestyle versus going back.
I brought up before, the cute story about that kid who grew up in the Bronx by the name of Ralph Lipschitz, who was a tie designer. How hard do you see, both as an accountant, as people in the industry, how difficult is it? Do you think it would be the same way that your father and his partner opened up the company 58 years ago? How hard would it be to start out, to go into the fashion and apparel industry today?
I think
it was a $100,000 investment when you originally went in there. And the first guy wanted to only give $5,000, they wanted you to go for $95,000. But today, it's a difficult thing.
Michael, nobody will not give you credit for always doing your own homework, so our compliments to you. I think it's very doable today. I think the landscape is very different, the dynamics are different, but the fundamentals are there. And if people have a great understanding of what product they want to make, why they want to make it, why does the consumer need it with all the product choices they have out there today, if they have something that really makes sense, or they're able to really convince a lifestyle that's going to be a little different than what's out there today.
I agree with you, and I think of you with the Uggs. I mean, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, nobody knew what Uggs were. Okay,
that's when we started with them. We started with them, and boot didn't exist.
And my favorite story is there was an article written about me, which wasn't published, but it was supposed to, that I came to the studio wearing Ugg boots, leather Ugg boots, because it was cold, okay? And I even said, it was a retail show, and I said I bought them in the Costco on 116th Street. So, which now brings up to a different thing. So new products, like the wearables, the Uggs. How about the Sam's and the Costco? What effect are they, because they're such massive purchasers, if you get into them? It's like the Walmart.
Yeah, I mean, the evolution of the creation of companies like ours to recreating them today, that presents so many dynamics, even for ourselves, because while we didn't start a new business today, in essence we did, because we had to re-evolve ourselves and reinvent ourselves from being 58 years old or almost 60 years old to being a relevant company today. I mean, we have such a dynamic team, and that includes, what is the most relevant place to reach a consumer. A retailer like Costco has, they captured that market for us. So if we're not in that store, we're missing putting our product in front of the consumer.
And they also limit their products,
They do.
There's, you don't see 6 pair of different glove companies. You see one glove company. You see one children's. They really limit.
In many ways, they're great partners. They understand how a manufacturer needs and a marketing company needs to behave in order to make money, and they know how to kind of focus on that. So yeah, it's very important in the mix.
What about this, which has been in the press, this discussion that Walmart and other retailers now want you to pay for distribution facilities?
Well, it's definitely very relevant. It's definitely very real. Manufacturers and suppliers have no choice but to deal with it and to kind of look at it. But at the end of the day, retailers, for the most part, are great partners. They understand that you're in business for profit, and that they really just want the very best value. And if you can really bring them the very best value, then usually issues like the discounts that they want or the returns that they want, usually there's a fair amount of partnership that goes on that it gets worked out to both sides' satisfaction.
Both of you and you, in different ways than yourself as a bank, deal with the Asian market, the Chinese market, the Japanese market. And at one time there was a discussion that it was really difficult unless you had an agent or someone in these countries who was your consigliere or to do something. I remember that. Is that true today, or can somebody go there without that Chinese agent? Because
the
I've
word
seen this in the real estate industry.
Yeah. The word agent hasn't become obsolete. Agents do exist today. However, the role of an agent has really evolved. Today, your ability to communicate with suppliers 20, 30 years ago compared to where that is today is night and day. I mean, every one of our suppliers can speak English. Every one of them have email access and are communicating multiple times a day, PDA, mobile phones. So the agent role is evolved, but an agent still plays an important role, especially with, you have political dynamics that go on in countries, you have foreign currencies that can fluctuate, you have labor that can, affect things. So if you're not there on every day, you can't be an expert at that.
We haven't dealt mainly with agents because we've had presence over there, both with our factories and then setting up an office in Shanghai. And I think the need for the communication, I agree 100%. You've got to be on top of it and have the ability to correlate and be involved in decisions that are going on. And it happens very quickly because things just move at such a faster pace today.
Now, you have an office or partners who are...
Yes, we do. So if we have issues where we have to help a client out with something that's going on in China, they have transactions, we have people on the ground there that can do that.
Foreign currency, what about that? That's a big item.
Obviously, most apparel companies today are either sourcing overseas or even selling overseas. So we can help them out with foreign exchange transactions, whether it be hedging or spot transactions.
How do you determine where to have distribution centers for your products?
It's something we're constantly looking at. You have to be nimble and flexible at the same time. There are some hard assets that we do want to own because we want to be in business for the long run, and we really do need the very best cost to operate and be able to pass that along. So it's a balance. We look at a lot at the West Coast. We look at, can we do distribution in other ways and be more creative and kind of save our retailers money? And if we can and pass that along, it's a win-win.
Last question, and I brought it up. How do you find the next generation of people to continue your business? How do you find that, if it's family business or other things, how do you retain and get new employees?
I guess I'm fortunate in a couple of ways. I've got a son and son-in-law in the business, and they're fourth generation. So that's one aspect. But we still do and have developed a core of young, good people who I think are available. Yes, it's a process, and you need to look for them and develop them and nurture them. But there are people who still want to be involved in fashion and still believe in the field.
Project Runway, my wife and the rest, it's one of the reasons. And you?
Our company has made a commitment to reinvest in people. We actually just recently brought in a very senior human resource executive out of a major multi-billion-dollar company for the sole purpose of being able to improve the talent, which we're constantly doing. And that has proven to be probably one of the best assets we've created in the last short time. And through that, there's no shortage of great talent. You just have to really have the best opportunity. You have to be offering really a great future. And I think we're able to do that from the dynamics of location, being in New York City, not having to be a startup. We're a very established company. We have, incredible brands. So when you look at the dynamics, just today, this morning at 8 a.m., I interviewed an executive that I hope will join our company from a very major company.
So in summation, as I said, the fashion apparel business survives and continues to grow in New York. And I'm happy that I've assembled, with the help of Joe, a great group. I'd like to thank Richard, Michael, Tom, and our host, Joe, and I'll see you next week.